Guys, this is Kyoku and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be talking about the mysterious murder that happened in room 1046 or 1046, however you want to say it. So before we get started, I just wanted to give a disclaimer that I don't mean any disrespect to the victim or the victim's family or anybody that I talk about in this story. This is obviously just based on my research and what I found on the internet. So let's get straight into the story because this is a good one. So on the 2nd of January in 1935, an individual called Roland T. Owen checked into the President Hotel in Kansas City. It was a bit strange when he did check in because the only belongings that he had with him were a toothbrush, a comb, toothpaste. That is it. So he had no suitcase, no other clothes, no other belongings. That was all he brought with him. So a bit unusual to start with there. So the bellboy that took him up to his room noticed that he did have a scar on his face and he also had a cauliflower ear, which if you don't know what a cauliflower ear is, it's when kind of the top bit of your ear has been scarred. It's normally kind of from boxing or kind of blunt force trauma or that type of thing that's happened on your ear, and then it does permanently scar and it is kind of in the shape of what you call a cauliflower ear. The bellboy was called Randall Props and he took him up to his room. While he was walking up to his room, Roland did complain, saying that he was going to stay into another hotel. However, it was too expensive because they were charging $5 a night, whereas I think they were only charging a couple of dollars here, so he decided to stay here instead. So once he showed him to his room, he put the little belongings that he had got in his pocket into the bathroom, and then they both left the room. So the bellboy and Roland both left the room. So later that day, the maid came up to the room just to do normal cleaning jobs. And she went into his room and noticed that he was kind of sat there in the dark. So he got kind of like the curtains drawn, sitting in the dark, and he just got the bedside lamp on, which wasn't very bright, so it didn't really give him much room. And he was just kind of sat there. The maid said that he appeared nervous and anxious, as if he was scared of something, but he was on his own. So she carried on cleaning, doing her bits, and then he did say to her, "Could you please lock the room when you're done, because I am expecting a friend round." And then he actually left the room and left the maid to it. So I just wanted to explain a little bit about how the locks work in this hotel. So obviously if you go to a normal hotel now, you can't have somebody come and lock you in your room, but this was the thing then, and apparently that was quite normal. So there's nothing weird about that. It's just, for some reason, if you were in your room and somebody had the key and wanted to come and lock you in, they could do. So later on that day, the maid did return and she did notice that there was a do not disturb sign on the door. So she presumed that he'd possibly gone out. There's mixing stories as to whether she knocked or not, but I don't think that's relevant, to be honest with you. So she let herself into the room. So once again, he was sat in the room and he was sat in the dark. Why he was sat in the dark, I don't know. He was also sat fully dressed, like fully clothed, just sat on top of the bed. Is it kind of weird? I know that I've gone to hotels myself, and if, like, say if you've had a long day, you would just come in and then just chill and sit on the bed, but normally you would be doing something, not that you had that much to do. Obviously in 1935 you couldn't be sat on Facebook or anything like that, but it did just seem a bit odd for him just to be kind of sat there quietly. The maid did notice that when she was cleaning the room this time, there was actually a note left on the side, and the note read, "Don, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." So that was a bit weird. We don't know who this Don was, but she kind of took a note of it as she was cleaning the room, carried on cleaning the room, and then she left. So the next day, the maid came back to clean the room again. As you do, obviously it's quite common for maids to come and keep cleaning your room. As she entered the room, she did notice that he was in his room again, and again he was sat in the dark. And he was kind of sat, you know how you have like a corner chair in the room in some hotels? He was sat in the corner chair, not really doing anything, just sat there silently in the dark. So So the maid obviously felt a little bit eerie and did remember this, because obviously that's going to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable because it's kind of odd behaviour. Again, she does say that he seems a bit anxious and a bit nervous. While the maid was in the room this time, she actually heard him get a phone call. So the phone did ring, and obviously she could only hear one side of the phone call. So she said he answered the phone, he did listen for a bit, and then he said, "No, Don, I do not want to eat. I'm not hungry. I've just had breakfast." So again, with the Don, we don't know who Don is at the minute, so a bit unusual, and apparently he just hung up the phone afterwards, so not really an endearing phone call. I don't know what type of relationship they had. So obviously the maid then did leave once she'd finished doing all her cleaning. So that afternoon, the maid did come back. So the maid came back and she had some fresh towels, because she took the towels earlier to clean as she would normally do. So now she's bringing some fresh towels for them, as who would not want fresh towels? As she came to the door, she could actually hear two men's voices talking this time. Possibly Don? We don't know. So obviously she could hear the two men talking, so she knocked on the door, and then obviously she was letting them know, "It's the maid here, I've come here, I've got some fresh towels for you." Obviously expecting them to want the fresh towels, as normal people do. So she kept knocking on the door, because I don't think she got an answer straight away. And then she heard kind of a new voice. Obviously it's this other person's voice, said it was a much deeper voice, just saying that they don't need any towels. Which the maid was a bit confused by, because she knew for a fact that she took all of the towels from the room earlier, so they now have no towels. But anyway, she did as she was told, and then she left. So this is where a couple more strange things do start to happen. So there were reports from the room next door that actually they heard a male and a female voice arguing throughout the night, like screaming, arguing, having a domestic. They don't really say what they actually hear. They don't really describe any words. Well, if they do, I could not find a record of what they said that they had heard anywhere. They also said that they heard gasping noises at some point, but just presumed that this was one of them snoring, and that maybe one of them had fell asleep and the argument was over now. So they didn't actually report hearing any of this at this time. Also, a couple of blocks away from the hotel, a man named Robert actually got flagged down by a young male that he seen out in the street that thought he was a taxi driver. So this young male, bearing in mind it's January and it's cold, was out just in his boxers and an under t-shirt, and his face was kind of all beaten up and looked like he'd been in a fight. So this Robert man, he said it was okay, not to worry, for him to get in the car with him, and he would take him to somewhere where he could get a taxi from. Which is, obviously it was more common for people to get rides with different people then, whereas nowadays you generally would not get in a car with somebody that you don't know and would not let anybody in your car. So he takes him off, drops him off to where he can get a taxi from, but during this journey he the man that he picked up kind of starts muttering to himself, saying that he is going to kill him tomorrow. So we don't really know the exact words, because the newspaper that reported this, it actually did bleep a lot of it out because a lot of it was swear words, but from what I've kind of looked into, it looks like he is saying that he's going to kill this effing effer tomorrow. I don't really want to swear because I don't want this video to get flagged, but yes, something along those lines, threatening that he is going to hurt somebody tomorrow. But then this man is out the car, gone to get a taxi, and Robert doesn't think of it anymore. Also, at some point during the night, a woman did arrive at the hotel. So this woman was described as commercial looking. I don't really know what that means. I think they mean kind of she was dressed nice, she looked well kept, that type of thing. There's a lot of rumours that were going around saying that this woman was well known and that she was actually a sex worker. But I'm not sure if they are rumours or if that is actually a fact as to whether she is or not. I think it was quite a taboo topic then, so not many people would have said if she was a sex worker. I think that's just what they thought because they had seen her around with different men when she was in this hotel. However, nobody actually knew the identity of this woman and nobody knew her name. So when this woman, I think she arrived around midnight, she kind of came into the hotel and she was looking for room 1026 to meet a friend. So did she get this mixed up with room 1046? Very similar, I don't know. So she went up the lift, elevator, to try and go to find the person that she was looking for. But she couldn't actually find who she was looking for, so she did come back down again. I think there was a bit of kind of kerfuffle. She was confused as to who she was looking for, and then at some point later on, she did actually come back in the hotel and go back up with a man dressed in a suit. So we don't know who this man was. I don't know if that's the person that she was looking for, or if that is just somebody else that's joined her, that is then obviously now going to look for the same person. Unknown male and female did leave the hotel. There was nothing else suspicious reported against them. They were caught on some CCTV, but they were never able to identify these two individuals. And also, we don't really know for a fact if they were actually going to room 1046. They could have been going to another room. Who knows? Another thing to note as well during the night is obviously people did report arguments, and obviously there was other people there. However, one of the other rooms, they were having a party that night, so whether some of the noise came from there or not, I don't know. The next morning, around 7 AM, obviously the staff of the hotel could tell that the phone had been left off the hook in room 1046. So they went up, I think they sent a bellboy up to go and see what was going on, and obviously to let them know, look, the phone's off the hook, can you put it back on please? So they sent up a bellboy called Harold Pike. He went up to try and sort out why is the phone off the hook. So when he went up, he went to see what was going on. They obviously had the do not disturb, why can't I say words? They had the do not disturb sign on the outside of the door, so he knocked on the door, several times he knocked on the door. I don't think he got an answer. No, so they did not answer the door. However, he did hear a voice telling him to come in. However, the room was locked, and he didn't have a key, he didn't have a master key. I think it was only the maids that had those, I'm not really too sure. So he couldn't get in, so he just kind of yelled at the door, put the phone back on the hook, presuming that it was kind of drunk antics, a bit annoyed, and then kind of went back downstairs again. An hour and a half later, another bellboy, so Harold Pike, the first bellboy was Randall that went up, the one that brought him in, so I may have said that wrong, sorry. So the second one that came up was actually Harold Pike. So he went up to the room because the phone was still off the hook. So he goes up to the room, he starts knocking on the door, and he doesn't get a response. So at this point they have a key, so they just let themselves in. So when he gets let into the room, he actually sees that Roland is in the room and he's naked, lying on the bed. So he's naked, lying on the bed, and he can see that the phone has kind of been knocked over, so it's clearly not on the hook anymore. So he kind of goes over, puts the phone back on the hook, and kind of glances slightly over towards Roland and noticed that there's kind of like a dark patch and some spots around him. But obviously the room was dark, he didn't go in and turn the light on, so he didn't really want to pry too much. And obviously if there's somebody there that's naked on the bed, you're not just going to stand and stare. So he kind of, the phone sorted and just got back out of the room, and then he went. Later on, I think it was like another hour or so, they actually then realised that the phone is off the hook again. So obviously it's the first one this time that goes back up. So the first bellboy, it was Randall Props, that went back up to the room to see what is going on, just expecting that this is going to be kind of drunk behaviour. Is he drunk, half asleep, what is he doing, sort of thing. I'm so sorry if you can see my cat, she will not leave, I have tried, we're just going to go with it, okay? So as I was saying, so he goes back up to the room to see what is going on. He knocks on the door and he doesn't actually get any response, so he's got a key this time. He's just going to open the door and see what the hell is going on. We need to kind of get this phone back on so it's not kind of setting off any alarms or seeing that we can have it down in the reception area. So when he opens the room, he gets a sight that he is not expecting. So he opens the door, and then within a couple of feet of the door he actually sees Roland lying kind of crouched over on the floor with his head in his hands, and he is covered in blood. So obviously he turns the light on so he can kind of assess the situation, and there is blood all over the walls, it's all over the ceiling, it's all over the bathroom, Obviously, he is covered in blood. He can see that his hands and his feet have actually been tied. He also had been stabbed several times. One of them did actually puncture his left lung, and it looked like he'd got ligature marks around his neck as if somebody had tried to strangle him, and he had also been beaten pretty badly. So at this point, he panics and obviously goes to get some help. They call the police immediately, and the police do arrive on the scene. So obviously when the police come, they're trying to get him up, but he is struggling to stand up. So he is alive, I will point out he is alive at this point. But obviously he can't really move because his hands and his feet have been tied. It just makes it a lot difficult. Obviously he's been stabbed, he's woozy. So the police question him and they said, who's done this to you? What's happened? They asked him if he had tried to kill himself, which he replied no. And when they asked him what happened, he said, I fell against the bathtub, I believe his words were, which I can't see how this is possible because he was in the bedroom by the door, so he's not hit the bathtub and then got blood everywhere in the bedroom. That doesn't make sense. Obviously he didn't tie himself up, so it seems to be like he's protecting his killer at this point. Well, attacker, as he was still alive. But unfortunately, on the way to the hospital, he did fall into a coma and he did pass away around midnight on that night. Obviously the police and the investigators are looking to see what's happened here because clearly this man has been beaten and he has been murdered. He was stabbed, he was bound. This is not something that he is going to be capable of doing himself. So to add to the strange things that happened in this case, there was nothing left in this room. So when the man was found, when Roland T. Owen was found, he was naked. None of his clothes were in the room. Everything was gone. Even the shampoo was gone out of the room. Everything was gone. The only items that were actually left in the hotel room was a safety pin, a hairpin, an unsmoked cigarette, an unopened bottle of diluted sulfuric acid, and a smashed glass with a chunk of the glass missing. And investigators do believe that this part of the glass that was smashed was something that was used to stab him with. They also did find some bloody fingerprints on the phone, which obviously they don't have as much technology as what we have right now, but they did establish that they thought it was a female's fingerprints because they were quite small. But when I was looking at this case and kind of saying, well, who else has been in the room? But at some point earlier, did one of the bellboys not come up and put the phone back on the stand? So if there was blood everywhere in the room, could that have got on his hands at that point when he put it back on? Could it have come from there? But then maybe not, because then obviously the bellboy would have noticed that there was blood on his hand. But was there not blood there at that point? It just seems a bit of an odd one to me, but... So when the police are then looking at this and they take a look more into the detail, and obviously when they're looking at his body, they do say that this actually happened 7 hours before he was found. So when he actually got a visit from one of the bellboys earlier, so not the one that found him but the one before, where he noticed that there was some kind of dark area around him, he would already have been attacked at that point and would already have been bleeding out at that point. So obviously the police then wanted to report this to his family and friends and to find out what happened. So they got in touch with the local district to obviously look for a Roland T. Owen, but they could not find a Roland T. Owen anywhere. This person did not exist. They had no idea who this person was. So unfortunately, when they were asking around, they could not find anyone that could identify him. So the funeral home actually did kind of have, I think it was a day or so, where people could come in to see, obviously, the body and see if it was their lost loved one that they were looking for. I do believe around 300 people came to see if, obviously, is this their lost loved one that they've been looking for. But unfortunately, nobody did recognise him as their missing person. The only person that did claim to have known who this was actually Robert, the driver from earlier on in the story. However, this has not been given much credibility because The police have said nobody in the hotel has reported anybody that would have entered the hotel naked, basically, just in boxers and an undershirt, and also that the hotel staff would have not let him into the hotel dressed like that. None of the hotel staff ever recall seeing anybody dressed like that, so that was kind of wiped out and just ignored as if that didn't happen, because they didn't think that that was actually Roland T. Owen, based on everything else they did look at in that situation. There was one other person that did notice him, and I think it was something to do with a wrestling match that he may have been involved with, but he didn't know any more information. So the police were kind of at a loss at this point, because they had no idea who he was, they had no idea who had done this, and they were really struggling to kind of put anything together because there was nothing left in the room. Obviously, the funeral home, they were getting ready to just kind of do a pauper's funeral. What else can they do at this point? Obviously, they can't just keep his body there. They do have to have a funeral and bury him. However, the funeral company then did get a call saying that they need to postpone the funeral and that he will not be buried in a pauper's grave. So this man that called up the funeral home said that he was going to send money and pay for him to have a proper funeral. He did have a requirement though. So he asked that he should be buried in Kansas City Memorial Park so he can be near to my sister. There were also reports that this caller said that Roland had actually jilted a girl, and possibly that's why everybody was going to the hotel room. Possibly these are the two individuals, this other male and female. They'd gone to this hotel room to discuss that, and then it had maybe got out of hand. Obviously, the funeral home tried to press him for more information. Some of it is rumoured, and obviously we don't have the exact recording. But what it is kind of quite commonly believed that he did said is, cheaters usually get what's coming to them. So then that maybe implies, did this unknown individual then cheat on somebody? Is this revenge for cheating on somebody? But then obviously the caller doesn't say anything else. However, the money does turn up for the funeral, so obviously the funeral home can have a proper funeral for him now. But who is this caller? Obviously he knew who the deceased was, so why is he not saying more information? Was it possibly the killer? The flower company also got a similar call from a male ordering 13 roses on behalf of his sister, and the money did turn up as well to them in, I think it was wrapped in newspaper, and it came with a card that did say, "Love forever, Louise." So who is Louise? Is Louise the person that he's possibly cheated on? We just don't know at this point. Another phone call that was made in connection to this case was to actually a newspaper. So a newspaper had run the story about the death, and they had said that he was going to be having kind of a basic funeral, not a proper funeral, just in kind of a pauper's grave. However, it was a woman that called up this magazine saying that what they have printed is wrong and that funeral arrangements have now been made. So the newspaper people pressed them for more information, because it's like, hold on a minute, who are you and how do you know this? So all they could get from this woman was that now a proper funeral had been made and that he had actually got in a bit of a mess. I think her exact words were, he got into a jam. So a jam that ended up being brutally murdered, possibly tortured. I'm not sure what sort of jam that could be. At this point, the case went cold for a year or so, so there were no more leads. The police really had nothing to go on, and nobody else got in touch. They didn't even know who this individual was until around a year later. In 1936, a woman called Ruby Ogletree actually seen a piece in the newspaper covering this story, and they had a picture attached, and she realised that this was actually her son, Artemis Ogletree. So he was actually from Birmingham, and he had gone travelling, and I think he was on his way to go to California, So the police did believe this story as she recognised the scar on Artemis's face, saying that he had actually got this when he was younger, when he was a child, from getting burnt. And a lot of people, when they were looking to see who this was, they believed that his age was somewhere between 25 to 35. Nobody really knew, but Ruby confirmed that he was actually only 17 years old and all of this had happened to him. And at this point he had only left home for 8 months, which is sufficient time to make it to where he was planning on going. So what happened in between there where he didn't get to where he was going and then got mixed up in something that caused him to be murdered? The strange thing as well to add to this case is that Artemis had been regularly writing to his mum as he had gone on his travels. So to start with, she was receiving letters every couple of weeks, really staying in contact with him. But then obviously the longer it went on, the less and less she started to hear from him, which is pretty normal, I guess, if you're a teenager off exploring, going to obviously wherever you want to go, living life and doing what teenagers do by having fun. However, she did still receive letters after he had actually passed away. And the thing that changed in these letters is that they were actually typed instead of handwritten. And Ruby thought this was a bit weird because she knew that her son couldn't actually type. So who was sending these letters? She also said that the language used in these typed letters is not what she would typically expect to come from her son. Like it's not the language that he would normally use. Different types of slang, and just on top of the fact that he can't use a typewriter, just seemed very suspicious. These letters were also coming from weird places, like one came from Chicago and one came from New York. So what was he doing in these places? These weren't where he was supposed to be going, so maybe his plans have changed, he was now doing something else, but it didn't really say that much in the letters. One of the letters might have also said that he's changed his plans to go Europe actually, which she found very, very weird because he had never mentioned that before. Ruby also gets a long distance phone call from somebody going by the name of Jordan. So this individual states that he knew her son Artemis very well, and she did believe that he must have met her son at some point because he knew a lot of detail that unless you had actually met him, you wouldn't know. He also did say that they became great friends. I think he got into a bar fight and Artemis saved him, and at some point he did lose his thumb. So that was why he was unable to write the letters anymore and now had to type them, because he didn't have his thumb to be able to write properly in these letters. The other thing that was said in this phone call was that Artemis has actually met an Egyptian woman and had now gone, she was wealthy, they'd gone to get married, and that he was living happily with her, which is obviously not the case and unfortunately not what's happened here. But the police were never able to track down this person, and they didn't have, as I've said earlier, the technologies to what we have today, and she never ever heard from this person again. But was this possibly the person that was sending the letters? That's literally all we have in regards to facts of this case. So what the hell happened? Who killed him? Why did they kill him? What actually happened here? So there's quite a few theories around this case, so I'll go into some of them briefly because some of them are a bit far-fetched in my opinion. So the first theory starts with, well, who is Don? Who is Don that we have been talking about? So there's a lot of theories that this could be a mafia hit, as obviously that's quite a common name used by the mafia bosses. So some do believe that this was a mafia hit and he had somehow got mixed up in something along the way in his travels. But the thing is about that case is, why are they carrying on writing to his mum? If you have been hit by a mafia person, they don't care if your mum's sad or not. So this one seems a bit far-fetched to me personally, the fact that they would still make that effort afterwards, because I just don't think they would care, in my opinion. The only other possible lead that they did have in regards to finding who Don was that they actually arrested a man for shooting another man and trying to ship his body to Memphis. So the name of the person that they arrested was called Donald Kelso, and this individual had actually checked into another hotel with another individual called Duncan Ogletree. And obviously these were fake names, but the name Ogletree is very unusual, so this seemed a bit suspicious to police looking at it. However, this was as far as that link went. There was nothing else to link them again, so again, another dead end. There's a lot of speculation out there that possibly he was in a relationship with Don. Obviously, back then it was not as openly accepted to be in a gay relationship, so they could have actually been hiding their relationship, and maybe this was a hate crime. However, to me this just seems unlikely because they were in a hotel. I can't see somebody personally coming into a hotel for this reason, but again, I don't know, I wasn't there. There is another theory as well that he was in a relationship with Don, however they had a lover's tiff, which is why he did not want to give up his name, because obviously he was in love with him and didn't want to give him up to the police. But that kind of ties in with some of the phone calls was that he was in a relationship with the individual who was called Louise on the card that was left with the flowers, and he possibly cheated on her, and that Don could have been her brother, and obviously they both came to the hotel to discuss it, and then it ended badly. Obviously that would explain as well why he was acting anxious and nervous, because he didn't know how it was going to go. Also, that does fit in with the kind of the cheaters comment that was made earlier, if they were upset about him cheating possibly, and then it turned into murder for revenge. I think this case just kind of makes me feel really uneasy, just because why was he sat in the dark? What is it that he was actually worried about? Did he know that somebody was after him? It seems as though something was going on that was making him stressed and nervous. It's just the lack of kind of evidence that they have after. So what happened? I don't think we will ever really know what happened in this case. I don't think they will ever really find out who murdered this individual. And obviously it was not himself, because you can't tie yourself up and stab and choke yourself. You just can't do it. So what do you guys think? So, bit of a weird one, I think. But yeah, thank you for watching, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed this one. Let me know your comments on this one. What do you think happened here? I think maybe a mafia hit. Maybe, I don't know. It's just the fact that they then got in touch with his mum after to make her feel okay. Just seems like an effort that the mafia wouldn't make, in my opinion. Let me know your thoughts and theories. Thank you again for watching, guys, and if you do like this kind of stuff, please give the video a thumbs up and like and subscribe, and I will see you next week.